Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. It feels like the housing market is definitely cooling off. It seems like every single day there's a fresh new set of headlines warning of an impending housing market crash. And it makes sense because what's more clickable than doom and gloom? And while a crash might be a bit of a stretch, the housing market is certainly taking a turn. The latest bad news to come out of this segment is that there's an increasing number of home purchase agreements that are falling through, meaning buyers are backing out of the deal rather than rushing to close the deal. In June, 14.9% of all home purchase agreements fell through. That translates to 60,000 contracts that fell through. That is the highest percentage since this metric has been tracked. The market today is drastically different than the market just a year ago, where buyers were buying homes sight unseen, waiving inspections, and bidding wars were the norm. So maybe a cooling off period is well overdue. The fact of the matter is, over the past 2 years, homes across the nation saw an average of a 20% increase, and those surging prices, now coupled with rising interest rates, are creating a very different housing market. And consider now that many home buyers, especially first-time home buyers, have been priced out of the market. Housing prices are higher than they've ever been, and interest rates are higher than they've been in decades. Coupling those together makes housing quite unaffordable for many. For the past decade or so, mortgage rates have averaged less than 4%, hitting lows of 2.6% during the pandemic housing surge. And now, as the Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates to combat inflation, mortgage rates are following suit. They peaked at 5.8% in the end part of June, but have since come down to 5.3%. Prior to the pandemic, our interest rates were already low, but in an attempt to prevent an economic and countrywide slowdown, like a recession, when those first stay-at-home orders hit, the Fed took action to keep the economy and the country chugging along. They lowered interest rates and pumped out trillions of dollars. And it worked. These lower interest rates and more money sent people on spending sprees, and lower interest rates meant that people could lock in amazing rates when it came to cars and homes. And thus was born the pandemic real estate market. So it appears that the Fed threw a little bit of too much gasoline on that economic fire, so to speak, and rather we just ended up kicking that recession can down the road. So rather than a recession hitting when the pandemic hit, we had a surge in spending followed by inflation, and now the Fed is having to fight high inflation by towing the line of a recession. It feels like we're back where we started. We just took a more expensive route to get here. Different, but the same. What do you think? And while housing prices have sort of leveled off, they remain quite elevated from where they were just a year or two ago. And the Fed has made it very clear that they are going to continue increasing interest rates in an attempt to combat inflation. So it's clear to see that these rising interest rates are impacting home buyers. Just this time last year, the average mortgage rate around the country was 2.9%. Today, it sits at 5.3%. That translates into an average monthly mortgage payment that is $513 higher for the same loan amount. $500 is kind of my favorite amount to cite in investment videos for no other reason than my favorite investment vehicle is the Roth IRA, and you can contribute $6,000 a year at this time and spread out over 12 months, that comes to $500. So when I see that the current mortgage is now $500 a month more on average, I think you could be funding your Roth instead, because after all, we only have so many $500 increments to go around every single month. And if your home is preventing you from saving for your future, well, that's not a good plan either. From a different perspective, let's say that you are budgeting $1,500 for a monthly mortgage payment. During the days of a 2.9% interest rate, that would allow you to buy a roughly $360,000 home. However, at a 5.3% interest rate, that only gives you a home budget of $270,000. That represents a loss in purchasing power of $90,000. And as we know, homes aren't any cheaper than they were a year or 3 years ago, hence why so many buyers are finding their budgets a little bit tighter and a little bit strained. We're actually seeing a change in behavior on both the buyers and the sellers side of things. When it comes to the buyers, they aren't having to buy the home sight unseen and waive inspections. Rather, we're seeing buyers stand firm on demanding those inspections. That is giving them the opportunity to perhaps back out of deals when issues come to light through these inspections. And as we have a smaller pool of buyers chomping at the bit to buy a home, we now see that the buyers are getting the power to negotiate. Negotiations were pretty much non-existent during the days of the pandemic. Rather, it was give me your best and final offer, I'll take it or leave it because I have 20 people behind you waiting to buy this house. And on the seller side of things, believe it or not, we're seeing a great deal of hesitation on the sellers wanting to bring their homes to market. Yes, home prices are still elevated and likely in most markets, sellers would be able to fetch a really good deal. But remember, interest rates are much higher than they previously were. So if these sellers would in turn have to go get a new mortgage on a new place, they would be locking in a mortgage at a much higher interest rate than they previously had. So yes, the housing market of 2022 is very different than the housing market of the past year or two. But you have to take that with a grain of salt because the housing market of the past year or two wasn't normal either. Now we're seeing a lot of new buzzwords thrown around, and the favorites seem to be recession and housing market crash. And these words are being thrown around because they evoke an emotion like, oh my God, what is happening? But the media is not your friend. They are not trying to make you feel good. They are trying to terrify you. At the present moment, rather than saying housing market crash, we could probably more likely say the housing market is cooling off. But that's not going to get as many clicks. Home sales have essentially returned to the levels seen in 2019, prior to the pandemic, after 2 years of gangbuster performance. Currently, just 20% of people believe it is a good time to buy a home. 75% think it is a bad time to buy, according to a study done by Fannie Mae. Mortgage loan applications are 17% lower than this time a year ago, but they're roughly in line for back this same time in 2019. Further sales declines should be expected in the upcoming months, giving housing affordability challenges from the sharp rise in mortgage rates this year. We're also starting to see a resurgence in the adjustable rate mortgage. These are starting to make headlines again, and currently they're accounting for 10% of all mortgage applications, whereas in past years they've only been 2 to 3%. These mortgage types offer you an initial lower teaser rate, and then over time they begin to fluctuate based on the current market rates. The incentive here is that you could lock in a below market rate during that initial time period. These mortgages really fell out of favor after the 2008 financial crisis, where many home buyers had utilized these types of mortgage for their initial teaser rates. But as that teaser period ended and interest rates increased, their mortgage payment increased to a point where many people could not afford to keep their homes. The good news is that nowadays there are much more stringent regulations on these loan types, but that doesn't make them the best mortgage type. The rates on these mortgages will fluctuate once you fall out of that initial teaser period. And we are in an environment where interest rates are increasing. So where do you think the rates are gonna go? Generally speaking, in a traditional ARM, these interest rates can increase 5% from their initial set point. Meaning that if you lock in a 3.25% loan on a $300,000 mortgage, it could become an 8.25% loan, meaning that your payment could go from roughly $1,300 a month to $2,200 a month. There really wasn't any incentive for buyers to use this loan type in the recent past. Rates were already so low, why not just lock in a mortgage at a low rate? But now that interest rates are increasing and ticking upwards, we are starting to see that these ARM mortgages are piquing the interest of some buyers. Some buyers like the idea of an ARM because they feel that they'll never really have to deal with those rising interest rates because perhaps they're going to sell their home before you even get out of that teaser rate. But to that, I say that life is unpredictable. What if you change your mind and you don't want to move? Can you truly afford that payment when it starts to tick upwards? Or what will the market look like in 4 to 5 years when you go to sell your home? Will you be able to sell it? Who knows at that time? Ultimately, I'm not a huge fan of these loan types. I don't like unpredictability. I want to know exactly what my payment will be over time, no surprises. And one final note, if you don't feel like now is the right time for you to buy a home, then don't buy a home. It may feel like everyone around you has bought a home or is buying a home, so perhaps you should too. But it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. You have to make your own decisions that are right for you and your life. And often you hear that statement of renting is just throwing away money. And quite frankly, no, it's not. Look, real estate is expensive. It requires a hefty outlay of cash up front and ongoing expenses that you do not face as a renter. And just because you're renting does not mean that you will end up financially behind someone who bought a property. In fact, it could be the opposite. Warren Buffett famously bought his home in Omaha, Nebraska in 1958 for $31,500. Today, that home is estimated by Zillow to be worth about $1.3 million. Great investment, right? Well, if Buffett had instead invested that $31,500 into the stock market, today it would be worth over $13.5 million. Now, of course, he's not lamenting over a decision he made to buy a home 64 years ago, but it does highlight a point that perhaps dollar-wise, this wasn't the best use of his money. But of course, these types of decisions are made on more than just dollars. Putting a roof over your head is a big deal, and buying a home gives you the opportunity to one day not have to pay a mortgage or not have to pay rent. All good things. Real estate can be a wonderful purchase, and in many instances, it can be a great investment. But I just use this example to illustrate that renting is not the equivalent of throwing away your money. Money has other uses, and you can put it to work in other ways. Only buy a home if you feel that it is personally right for you to do so. And that is based on a number of factors, not all of which are financial. And this is all just my opinion, but I don't think we're headed for a housing market crash. A cool down, yes, but that was kind of needed based on the past 2 years and how the market performed anyway. And we're going to see interest rates continue to rise, meaning that mortgage rates will also continue to rise as well, meaning that budgets might get a little tighter. But if you are looking to buy a home, make sure that you're going to stay in it for at least the next 5 years and make sure to set a budget and stick to it. What are your thoughts on what the housing market is going to do? Leave them in the comments down below. I read every single one of them and I reply to as many as I possibly can. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing or possibly consider sharing with a friend who might get something out of it. I hope you have a great week. I'll see you soon. Bye. The negative sense. Housing market sector, increasingly number, be a bit of a stretch. The housing market of home purchase agreements, geez, higher than we've seen in decades. We've done bidding wars a year ago when home buyer wars were the norm. Buyers were going when those first same, different, but the same. And while their prices do remain quite elevated, while home prices have leveled, favorite amount to cite an investment, new mortgage is now fetch a great deal. You feel fear. I don't like that. Media is not your friend. At best, they're trying to terrify you. At the present time, you could probably just say the housing market is cooling off, but that's not gonna get ice, baby. Currently, 10% of all. We're also starting to see Hey bud, you wanna go outside? Can you wait just a couple minutes? No, you wanna go now? Okay. All good things. I don't even know what I want to say. Your money, you money. If I could just remember, purchase it and for you to do so. And that decision. Good job. That's why I asked you to wait 2 minutes. You're so needy. Can I finish? Financial.